The security guard looked at his clipboard, then back at me, standing in the marble lobby of Harrison Industries. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you're not on the visitor list." "Are you sure you have the right building?" I almost laughed. If only he knew that the woman he was turning away owned every floor above us. "I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss." Growing up in the suburbs of Denver, Colorado, I never imagined my life would take the turn it did. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and at 28, I had already experienced more rejection from my own family than most people face in a lifetime. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was sitting in my cramped studio apartment in downtown Denver, nursing my second cup of coffee and scrolling through job listings when my phone buzzed. Mom's name appeared on the screen. "Sarah, honey, we need to talk about Easter dinner," she said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of forced cheerfulness that I'd grown to dread. "What about it?" I asked, though I already suspected where this conversation was heading. "Well, your Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert are coming with their kids, and your cousin Jennifer is bringing her new boyfriend, and—" She paused, and I could practically hear her calculating numbers in her head. "The thing is, we just don't have enough space at the table this year." I set down my coffee mug harder than necessary. "Mom, you have a dining room table that seats 12 people. "I know, but with everyone coming, and little Timmy needs his high chair, and Jennifer's boyfriend is quite tall so he needs extra room, and your father insists on having his spot at the head of the table." Her voice trailed off. "So I'm the one who gets cut?" "It's not like that, Sarah. You understand, don't you? You're always so reasonable about these things." "Maybe next year we can." I hung up, just like that. 28 years of being the reasonable one, the one who always understood when there wasn't enough space, wasn't enough money, wasn't enough attention to go around. This wasn't the first time, of course. It started when I was 7 and my younger brother Marcus was born. Suddenly, there wasn't space in the family photos, because someone had to hold the baby. There wasn't space in the car for family trips, because Marcus needed his car seat and all his baby gear. There wasn't space in my parents' attention because Marcus was colicky and demanded constant care. As we grew older, the pattern continued. When Marcus wanted to join Little League, there wasn't space in the budget for both of us to do extracurriculars, so I quit piano lessons. When it came time for college, there wasn't space in the savings account for 2 tuitions, so I worked 3 jobs to put myself through community college while Marcus got the full university experience at Colorado State. Sarah's always been the independent one, my mother would say to relatives, as if my independence was a choice rather than a necessity. But that Tuesday morning phone call was different. Something inside me snapped. I looked around my tiny apartment. The futon that doubled as my bed, the card table I used as a desk, the single window that faced a brick wall, and I realized I was still living like I didn't deserve to take up space. That afternoon I walked into the offices of Peterson and Associates, a small investment firm, where I'd been working as a junior analyst for 3 years. My boss, Mr. Peterson, was a kind man in his 60s who had always treated me fairly, but the company was struggling. We'd lost 2 major clients in the past month, and everyone could feel the tension in the air. "Sarah, glad you're here," he said, as I knocked on his office door. "We need to talk." I sat down across from his desk, expecting the worst. Instead, he slid a folder across to me. "I'm retiring," he said simply. "My wife's been after me for years to slow down, and frankly, I don't have the energy to rebuild this business." I nodded, trying to process what this meant for my job. "The thing is," he continued, "I've been watching you for 3 years. You're the sharpest analyst I've ever worked with. You see patterns others miss, you understand market psychology, and most importantly, you care about our clients like their family." He leaned back in his chair. "I want to sell you the business." I blinked. "Mr. Peterson, I don't have the money to." "Seller financing," he interrupted. "You pay me back over 10 years. I'll stay on as a consultant for the first year to help with the transition. What do you say?" The smart thing would have been to think it over, to call my parents, to seek advice. Instead, I heard myself saying yes. The next 6 months were a blur of 18-hour days, client meetings, and sleepless nights. I threw myself into rebuilding Peterson and Associates, or as it was now called, Mitchell Investment Solutions. I studied every client portfolio like my life depended on it, because in many ways, it did. The breakthrough came when I noticed something odd in the tech sector. Everyone was focused on the big-name companies, but I saw potential in a small startup called Innovate Tech that was developing sustainable energy solutions. Their financial statements were messy, their marketing was non-existent, but their technology was revolutionary. I convinced 3 of my clients to invest, pooling together $2 million. It was risky, the kind of risk that could end careers. But I had a feeling about Innovate Tech's young CEO, David Chen, and his passionate team of engineers. 6 months later, Innovate Tech was acquired by a major energy corporation for $200 million. My client's investment had increased by 5,000%. Word spread quickly through Denver's investment community. Suddenly, I wasn't just running a small firm anymore. Wealthy individuals were calling, asking me to manage their portfolios. Corporations wanted me to consult on acquisitions. The phone rang so often I had to hire an assistant, then 2 assistants, then a whole team. Within a year, Mitchell Investment Solutions had grown from a struggling 2-person operation to a firm managing over $500 million in assets. I moved from my cramped apartment to a downtown penthouse. I traded my 10-year-old Honda for a sleek BMW. But more importantly, I had found something I'd never had before: respect. Not just from clients and colleagues, but from myself. For the first time in my life, I wasn't apologizing for taking up space. I was creating space for my ideas, my business, my vision of what investment management could be. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had always said there wasn't space for me at their table, but I had built my own table, one where I sat at the head, making decisions that affected millions of dollars and hundreds of lives. As my second year in business began, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to expand beyond Denver. I had my eye on a struggling investment firm in Chicago, Harrison Industries. They had the client base and the reputation, but they were hemorrhaging money due to poor management. I flew to Chicago on a cold February morning, dressed in my best suit, carrying a briefcase containing an offer that would either make me a major player in the Midwest investment scene or cost me everything I had built. The Harrison Industries building was impressive, 30 floors of glass and steel in the heart of Chicago's financial district. As I walked through the revolving doors into the marble lobby, I felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. This was it, the moment that would define whether I was truly ready to play in the big leagues. That's when the security guard looked up from his clipboard and asked if I was sure I had the right building. As if someone like me couldn't possibly belong in a place like this. Little did he know that within the hour, I would own it. The security guard's nameplate read Thomas Williams, and he was scrutinizing me like I was trying to sneak into Fort Knox. Behind him, the lobby bustled with men in expensive suits and women in designer heels, all moving with the confident stride of people who belonged here. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification in the name of who you're here to see," Thomas said, his hand hovering over his radio. I pulled out my business card and slid it across the marble counter. "Sarah Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Investment Solutions. I have a meeting with the board of directors." He examined the card like it might be counterfeit. "I don't see any Sarah Mitchell on today's schedule." "Are you sure you're not looking for the Harrison building on State Street? That's where a lot of the smaller firms are located." Heat rose in my cheeks, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm here to discuss the acquisition of Harrison Industries. Perhaps you should call upstairs and confirm." Thomas picked up his phone with obvious reluctance. "Yeah, this is security. I've got a lady here claiming she has a meeting with the board about an acquisition." He paused, listening. "Sarah Mitchell says she's a CEO." The conversation continued for another minute, and I watched Thomas's expression shift from skepticism to confusion to something approaching panic. He hung up the phone and immediately straightened his posture. I apologize, ma'am. Mr. Harrison himself is coming down to escort you up. Can I get you anything while you wait? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you." Within minutes, the elevator doors opened, and out stepped Richard Harrison III, a man I'd only seen in photographs. He was in his late 50s, with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention. But as he approached, I noticed something the photos hadn't captured: the slight slump in his shoulders, the worry lines around his eyes. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Richard Harrison. I must apologize for the confusion downstairs." "No harm done," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. As we rode the elevator to the 30th floor, Harrison studied me with barely concealed curiosity. I have to admit, when my assistant told me the CEO of Mitchell Investment Solutions was here, I was expecting someone different. "Older? Male?" I asked with a slight smile. He had the grace to look embarrassed. "Perhaps. Your reputation precedes you, Ms. Mitchell. The Innovate Tech deal was brilliant. We should have seen that opportunity ourselves." The elevator opened into a reception area that screamed old money: dark wood paneling, leather furniture, and oil paintings of stern-faced men who I assumed were previous Harrison generations. A receptionist with perfectly styled blonde hair looked up from her computer. "Mr. Harrison, the board is assembled in the conference room," she said. "Thank you, Patricia. Ms. Mitchell, right this way." The conference room was dominated by a mahogany table that could seat 20 people. Today, it held 8 men and 2 women, all looking at me with varying degrees of skepticism and curiosity. Harrison took his seat at the head of the table and gestured for me to sit to his right. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Sarah Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Investment Solutions. Ms. Mitchell, let me introduce you to our board of directors." The introductions were a blur of prestigious names and impressive titles. James Crawford, former CEO of Midwest Financial. Margaret Thompson, senior partner at Thompson & Associates Law. Dr. Robert Chen, economics professor at University of Chicago. Each handshake felt like a test, each smile a careful calculation. "Now then," Harrison said once everyone was seated, "Ms. Mitchell has come here today with a proposition regarding the future of Harrison Industries. The floor is yours." I stood up, pulled out my tablet, and activated the presentation I'd prepared. The wall-mounted screen came to life with my company's logo. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today because Harrison Industries is dying." The room erupted in murmurs of protest, but I continued without pause. "Your client retention rate has dropped 30% in the past 2 years. Your assets under management have decreased from $8 billion to $5.2 billion. You've lost 4 major institutional clients in the past 6 months alone." Margaret Thompson leaned forward. "Ms. Mitchell, with all due respect, these are challenging times for everyone in our industry." "Are they?" I clicked to the next slide. "Because while Harrison Industries lost $3 billion in assets, my firm grew by 400%. While you were losing clients, I was gaining them. The difference isn't the market, it's the approach." I walked around the table as I spoke, making eye contact with each board member. "You're stuck in 1985. You still think investment management is about golf course handshakes and country club connections. Your average client is 73 years old, and you're not attracting anyone under 50. Dr. Chen adjusted his glasses. "And you believe you can fix this? How, exactly?" "By bringing Harrison Industries into the 21st century. Your brand recognition is valuable. Harrison has been a trusted name in Chicago for 80 years, but trust without performance is just nostalgia." I clicked to my next slide, showing a detailed financial analysis. "I'm prepared to offer $200 million for full acquisition of Harrison Industries. Your shareholders would receive immediate payment, and I would assume all assets and liabilities." The room fell silent. Harrison's face had gone pale. James Crawford was the first to speak. "Ms. Mitchell, that's a very generous offer, but Harrison Industries isn't for sale." "Everything's for sale, Mr. Crawford. It's just a matter of price." I clicked to another slide. "However, I'm not just offering money, I'm offering survival. At your current rate of decline, Harrison Industries will be bankrupt within 18 months. "That's impossible," Harrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" I turned to face him directly. "When was the last time you posted a quarterly profit? When was the last time you landed a client under the age of 60? When was the last time you innovated anything beyond changing the font on your letterhead?" Margaret Thompson stood up abruptly. "I think we've heard enough. Ms. Mitchell, this is highly irregular. You can't just walk in here and—" "And what? Tell you the truth?" I set down my tablet. "I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to make a deal that benefits everyone. Your shareholders get paid, your employees keep their jobs, and your clients get competent management. The room buzzed with heated whispers. I could see the board members were split. Some looked intrigued, others offended. Harrison raised his hand for silence. Ms. Mitchell, even if we were interested, which I'm not saying we are, $200 million seems ambitious for a firm of your size. How do we know you have that kind of capital? I smiled and pulled out my phone. Give me your bank's routing number. I'm sorry? Your bank's routing number. I'll wire a $10 million good faith deposit right now while we sit here. The room went dead quiet. Harrison looked around the table, then back at me. You're serious? Mr. Harrison, I don't waste time on jokes. I've spent the last month analyzing every aspect of your business. I know exactly what Harrison Industries is worth, and I know exactly what I can do with it. Dr. Chen leaned back in his chair. And what exactly can you do with it? Transform it. Your client base is aging out and dying off. I can bring in younger investors, tech entrepreneurs, and sustainable energy companies. I can modernize your investment strategies, implement algorithmic trading, and develop mobile platforms for client interaction. I walked back to my seat but remained standing. More importantly, I can give you something you haven't had in years. Growth. Real growth, not just the illusion of stability while everything crumbles underneath. Margaret Thompson had been taking notes frantically. Ms. Mitchell, this is all very interesting, but acquisitions of this magnitude require months of due diligence, regulatory approval, shareholder votes, all of which I'm prepared to handle. I have a team of lawyers standing by, accountants ready to audit every penny, and regulatory specialists who can navigate the approval process. I can have this deal closed within 60 days. Harrison was staring at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Ms. Mitchell, may I ask, why Harrison Industries? Why not build your own firm larger? Why not acquire someone smaller, less complicated? I sat down for the first time since beginning my presentation. Because I don't want smaller. I want to prove that a woman who started with nothing can not only survive in this business, but dominate it. Harrison Industries has the history, the reputation, and the infrastructure. I have the vision and the capital. Together, we can build something extraordinary. The board members exchanged glances. Harrison drummed his fingers on the table. I need to discuss this with my fellow board members, he said finally. Can you give us 15 minutes? Of course, I'll wait in the reception area. As I left the conference room, I could hear the voices rising behind the closed doors. Patricia, the receptionist, offered me coffee again, but I was too wired to sit still. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out over Chicago's skyline. 6 months ago, I'd been eating ramen noodles in a studio apartment. Now I was making a $200 million offer for one of the oldest investment firms in the Midwest. The girl who wasn't allowed at the Easter table was about to own the whole restaurant. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Sarah, I hope you're not upset about Easter. You understand, don't you? I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. The conference room doors opened, and Harrison emerged alone. His expression was unreadable. Ms. Mitchell, he said quietly, we need to talk. Richard Harrison's face was a mask of professional composure, but I could see the tension in his jaw. He gestured toward his private office, and I followed him past Patricia's desk into a corner suite that probably cost more than most people's houses. Please sit, he said, closing the door behind us. The office was a shrine to Harrison family legacy. Photographs of the company's founding, awards spanning decades, and a portrait of his grandfather, the original Richard Harrison. Ms. Mitchell, I'm going to be frank with you, he began, settling into his leather chair. The board is intrigued by your offer, but there are complications. I leaned forward slightly. What kind of complications? The kind that come with 80 years of family history. He picked up a crystal paperweight from his desk, turning it over in his hands. Harrison Industries isn't just a company to me. It's my legacy, my father's legacy, my grandfather's legacy. I understand that, Mr. Harrison, but legacies don't pay bills. His laugh was bitter. No, they don't, which is why I'm in the position I'm in. He set down the paperweight and looked directly at me. 6 months ago, I mortgaged my family's estate to keep this company afloat. My wife doesn't know. My children don't know. As far as they're concerned, everything is fine. The admission hung in the air between us. I'd suspected Harrison Industries was in worse shape than their public filings indicated, but this was more desperate than I'd imagined. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Discretion. If this deal goes through, I need assurance that my family's reputation remains intact. The Harrison name has meant something in this city for 3 generations. Mr. Harrison, if I acquire this company, I plan to keep the Harrison name. It has value, but I need complete control over operations." He nodded slowly. "The board voted 7-3 in favor of accepting your offer, with conditions." My heart rate spiked, but I kept my expression neutral. "What conditions?" "First, you maintain at least 60% of current staff for a minimum of 1 year. Second, you keep the Harrison name and honor our existing client contracts. Third, you provide a detailed transition plan before the deal closes." "And the fourth condition?" He smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. "There is no fourth condition. Ms. Mitchell, you just bought yourself an investment firm." The next hour was a blur of handshakes, preliminary paperwork, and champagne that appeared from somewhere in Harrison's office. The board members filed in one by one to congratulate me, their earlier skepticism replaced by cautious optimism. Margaret Thompson pulled me aside as the celebration wound down. "Ms. Mitchell, I have to ask, are you certain you're ready for this? Running a firm of this size in a city where you don't have established relationships." "Ms. Thompson, I've spent my entire life being told I wasn't ready for things. Not ready for a seat at the family table, not ready for leadership opportunities, not ready to take up space. I've learned that readiness is a luxury I can't afford to wait for." She studied me for a moment, then smiled. "I think you're going to surprise a lot of people." As the board members departed, Harrison and I found ourselves alone in his office. The weight of what had just happened was beginning to sink in. "There's something else you should know," he said quietly. "The reason we're in this position isn't just poor performance. We've been the target of a systematic client poaching campaign by Steinberg and Associates. They've been undercutting our fees and spreading rumors about our financial stability." "David Steinberg?" I asked. I knew the name. He ran one of the largest investment firms in the Midwest. "The very same. He's been trying to acquire Harrison Industries for 2 years, but at a fraction of what you're offering. When he finds out about this deal, he'll try to sabotage it." Harrison nodded. "David doesn't like to lose, and he especially doesn't like to lose to someone he'll see as an outsider." I stood up and straightened my jacket. "Then we'd better make sure this deal closes quickly and quietly." The next 3 weeks were the most intense of my life. I flew back and forth between Denver and Chicago, coordinating teams of lawyers, accountants, and regulatory specialists. Every morning brought new challenges: due diligence requests, regulatory filings, employee meetings. My Denver office had become a war room. My assistant, Jennifer Walsh, had essentially moved in, coordinating conference calls with Chicago while managing my existing clients. My investment team worked around the clock to ensure our current portfolios remained stable while I focused on the acquisition. "Sarah, you need to see this," Jennifer said one Friday morning, bursting into my office with a stack of papers. I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been reviewing Harrison Industries' client contracts. "What is it?" "David Steinberg filed a complaint with the SEC. He's alleging that your acquisition of Harrison Industries violates antitrust regulations." My blood ran cold. "That's impossible. We did a full regulatory review." "I know, but he's claiming that the combination of your Denver clients with Harrison's Chicago clients creates an unfair market concentration." I grabbed the papers from her hands and speed read through the complaint. It was clearly a delay tactic. Steinberg knew the allegations wouldn't hold up, but they would tie up the deal in bureaucratic red tape for months. "Get me Richard Harrison on the phone," I said. Harrison was in his office when I called, and his voice was tight with stress. "Sarah, I assume you've seen Steinberg's filing?" "Just now. Richard, this is a stall tactic. He's trying to buy time to make a counteroffer." "I know, but my board is getting nervous." Margaret Thompson called an emergency meeting for Monday morning. "Some of the members are wondering if we should consider other options." "What other options?" "Steinberg's highest offer was $60 million. I'm offering $200 million. "I know, but $60 million without regulatory complications might seem more attractive than $200 million tied up in legal battles." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Richard, give me until Monday, I have an idea. That weekend, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in my apartment with every document related to the Harrison Industries acquisition, looking for angles Steinberg might have missed. By Sunday night, I had a plan. Monday morning, I was back in Chicago, but this time I wasn't going to Harrison Industries. Instead, I went to the offices of Steinberg and Associates, located in a gleaming tower on LaSalle Street. The receptionist, a young man with perfectly styled hair, looked up as I approached. "Good morning, do you have an appointment?" "No, but I think Mr. Steinberg will want to see me. Tell him Sarah Mitchell is here." He made a phone call, and within minutes, David Steinberg himself appeared in the lobby. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the kind of aggressive confidence that came from never being told no. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, extending his hand, "I've been hearing quite a lot about you lately." "I'm sure you have. Can we talk?" He led me to his office, which was twice the size of Harrison's, and decorated with modern art that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. The view of Lake Michigan was spectacular. "I have to say, I'm impressed," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "You've managed to convince a desperate old man to accept an offer that's far more than his company is worth. Mr. Steinberg, let's skip the pleasantries. You and I both know your SEC complaint is frivolous. You're trying to kill my deal so you can swoop in with a lowball offer." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm simply concerned about market consolidation and fair competition." "Of course you are." I pulled out my tablet and set it on his desk. "I'm going to make you an offer." "I'm listening." "Withdraw your SEC complaint and I'll pay you $50 million for your client list and non-compete agreement." His eyebrows shot up. "My client list isn't for sale." "Everything's for sale, Mr. Steinberg. It's just a matter of price." I leaned back in my chair. "I'm going to acquire Harrison Industries one way or another. Your complaint will delay the deal, but it won't stop it. However, those delays will cost me money, and when I'm frustrated about losing money, I tend to become competitive." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm explaining market dynamics. When I own Harrison Industries, I'll have access to their client intelligence, their market research, their competitive analysis. I'll know exactly which of your clients are unhappy, which ones are paying too much in fees, which ones are looking for better performance." Steinberg's smile had disappeared entirely. "On the other hand," I continued, "if you withdraw your complaint and accept my offer, you can retire comfortably and avoid what would otherwise be a very expensive competition." He stared at me for a long moment. "You're not at all what I expected." "I get that a lot. Do we have a deal?" He picked up his phone and dialed. "Janet, cancel the Henderson meeting. I need to speak with my lawyer immediately." 2 hours later, I was back in Harrison's office with a signed withdrawal of the SEC complaint and a very expensive peace treaty with David Steinberg. The deal was back on track. "How did you do it?" Harrison asked, staring at the documents. "I convinced him that fighting me would be more expensive than joining me. Sometimes the best negotiation is the one where everyone gets what they need." As I left the Harrison Industries building that afternoon, Thomas, the security guard, called out to me. "Ms. Mitchell, ma'am?" I turned back. "Yes?" "I just wanted to say I'm sorry about that first day. I didn't know." "Thomas, you were doing your job. But I have a feeling things are going to be different around here." He smiled and nodded. "Yes, ma'am, I believe they are." As I walked out into the Chicago afternoon, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for permission to take up space. I was creating it. The closing ceremony took place on a crisp October morning in the downtown offices of Thompson and Associates Law. The conference room was packed with lawyers, accountants, and bank representatives, all focused on the mountain of paperwork that would officially transfer ownership of Harrison Industries to me. Margaret Thompson presided over the proceedings with the precision of a surgeon. "Ms. Mitchell, if you'll sign here, here, and initial here," she said, sliding documents across the polished table. Each signature felt surreal. Sarah Mitchell, CEO. Sarah Mitchell, President. Sarah Mitchell, majority shareholder. The same woman who'd been told there wasn't space for her at Easter dinner was now signing papers that made her one of the most powerful investment managers in the Midwest. Richard Harrison sat across from me, looking older than his 58 years. When the final document was signed, he extended his hand. "Congratulations, Ms. Mitchell. Harrison Industries is now yours." The room erupted in polite applause, but I barely heard it. I was thinking about the phone call I'd received that morning from my assistant Jennifer. "Sarah, you need to know something," she'd said. "Your parents called the Denver office. They heard about the Harrison acquisition on the news. They want to have lunch with you to, quote, celebrate your success." I'd hung up without responding. Some victories were too important to share with people who'd never believed in them. My first day as owner of Harrison Industries began at 6 a.m. I arrived at the Chicago office before the cleaning crew had finished, using my new keycard to access the executive elevator. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I was literally rising to the top of a building I'd once been questioned about entering. The executive floor was eerily quiet. I walked past the reception area where Patricia would arrive in 2 hours, past the conference room where I'd made my acquisition pitch, and into what was now my office. Richard had cleared out his personal belongings, leaving behind only the furniture and the portrait of his grandfather. I stood behind the massive desk, looking out at the Chicago skyline, and allowed myself a moment of pure satisfaction. Then I got to work. The staff meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. in the main conference room. I'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, knowing that my first impression would set the tone for everything that followed. As employees filed in, I studied their faces, some curious, others skeptical, a few clearly nervous about their job security. "Good morning, everyone," I began, standing at the head of the table. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, and as of yesterday, I'm the new owner of Harrison Industries. I know you have questions, and I'm here to answer them." A middle-aged man in the back raised his hand. "Ms. Mitchell, we've heard rumors about staff cuts. Are our jobs safe? What's your name?" "Michael Rodriguez. I'm a senior analyst." "Michael, I'm not here to fire people. I'm here to grow this company. However, I am here to change how we operate. Those who adapt will thrive. Those who don't will struggle." A woman near the front spoke up. "What kind of changes are we talking about?" "Laura Chen, isn't it? You handle institutional clients." She nodded, surprised I knew her name. "Laura, you've been managing the University of Chicago's endowment fund for 3 years. Their returns have been mediocre at best. Starting next week, we're implementing new portfolio management software that will give us real-time market analytics. You'll be trained on algorithmic trading strategies that can improve returns by 15 to 20%. The room buzzed with murmurs. This was clearly more change than they'd expected. "I know this is overwhelming," I continued, "but Harrison Industries has been coasting on reputation for too long. We're going to become a performance-driven firm. That means more work, higher standards, and significantly better results." Michael Rodriguez raised his hand again. "Ms. Mitchell, with all due respect, some of our clients have been with this firm for decades. They might not appreciate radical changes." "Michael, our clients don't care about tradition. They care about returns. Mrs. Eleanor Whitman has been a client for 22 years. Her portfolio has grown by an average of 3.2% annually. The S&P 500 has averaged 8.1% over the same period. She could have done better with index funds." The room fell silent. I'd done my homework on every major client, and they were beginning to realize it. "Starting Monday, we're implementing a new client review system. Every portfolio will be analyzed for performance, risk management, and growth potential. Clients who aren't satisfied with their returns will be offered new investment strategies. Those who prefer the old approach are welcome to find another firm." Laura Chen looked pale. "But what if we lose clients?" "Then we'll replace them with better ones. I've already secured meetings with 3 tech startups, 2 sustainable energy companies, and a cryptocurrency exchange. The investment world is changing, and we're going to change with it." The meeting continued for another hour, covering everything from new technology implementations to revised commission structures. By the time it ended, I could see the staff dividing into 2 camps, those excited by the challenges ahead and those terrified of losing their comfort zone. After the meeting, I retreated to my office to review the client files in detail. The picture they painted was even worse than I'd expected. Harrison Industries had been managing portfolios like it was still 1985, with heavy emphasis on blue-chip stocks and conservative bonds. Innovation was virtually non-existent. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer in Denver. The Wall Street Journal wants an interview about the acquisition. Also, your mother called again. I texted back, schedule the interview. Ignore my mother. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of 18-hour days. I split my time between Chicago and Denver, implementing new systems while maintaining my existing client relationships. The Harrison Industries staff adapted at different rates. Some embraced the changes enthusiastically. Others quietly began updating their resumes. The breakthrough came during my third week as owner. I was working late in my Chicago office when Laura Chen knocked on my door. "Ms. Mitchell, do you have a minute?" "Of course, Laura. What's on your mind?" She sat down across from my desk, looking nervous. "I've been thinking about what you said about the University of Chicago account. I've been managing their endowment conservatively because I was afraid of losing money. But you're right. I've been so focused on not losing that I forgot about winning." "What are you proposing?" "I've been studying the new portfolio management software. I think I can restructure their holdings to include some emerging market exposure and technology sector investments. It's riskier, but the potential returns are significantly higher." I leaned back in my chair. "Show me your analysis." For the next hour, Laura presented one of the most thorough investment strategies I'd ever seen. She'd identified undervalued companies in renewable energy, analyzed growth potential in artificial intelligence startups, and proposed a balanced approach that maintained stability while pursuing aggressive growth. "This is excellent work, Laura. Implemented immediately." Her face lit up. "Really? You're not concerned about the risk?" "I'm more concerned about the risk of standing still. In 6 months, I want you to present the results to the entire staff. Show them what's possible when we stop playing it safe." 3 months later, Laura's restructured portfolio had generated a 28% return for the University of Chicago, the highest performance in the institution's history. Word spread quickly through Chicago's investment community. By the end of my first year, Harrison Industries had grown from $5.2 billion to $8.7 billion in assets under management. We'd added 43 new clients, including several Fortune 500 companies. The staff had grown from skeptical to enthusiastic, and our reputation had transformed from stodgy reliability to innovative performance. The transformation wasn't just financial, it was cultural. The office that had once felt like a museum now buzzed with energy. Employees stayed late, not because they had to, but because they were excited about their work. The Harrison name still graced the lobby, but everything else had changed. One evening, as I was preparing to fly back to Denver, Patricia stopped by my office. "Miss Mitchell, I wanted to thank you," she said. "For what?" "For believing in us. When you first arrived, I thought you were going to fire everyone and start over. Instead, you made us better versions of ourselves." "Patricia, I didn't make anyone better. I just gave you permission to be as good as you already were." As I packed up my briefcase, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I'd been a small-town analyst with big dreams. Now I was running one of the most successful investment firms in the Midwest. But success had come with unexpected challenges. The bigger my company grew, the more attention I attracted. And not all of it was positive. As I was about to discover, being a successful woman in finance made you a target for people who believed success belonged to someone else. My phone rang as I was leaving the office. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Sarah Mitchell. "Ms. Mitchell, this is Detective Frank Morrison with the Chicago Police Department. We need to talk." Detective Frank Morrison's voice was calm but serious. "Ms. Mitchell, we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. Can you come to the precinct tonight?" My mind raced through possibilities. "Detective, what is this regarding?" "I'd prefer to discuss this in person. It involves threats made against you and your business." An hour later, I sat in a sterile interview room at the Chicago Police Department, facing Detective Morrison and his partner, Detective Lisa Rodriguez. Morrison was a heavy-set man in his 50s, with tired eyes that suggested he'd seen too much. Rodriguez was younger, sharper, with the kind of focused intensity that made you sit up straighter. "Ms. Mitchell, we've received several reports of harassment directed at you and your employees," Morrison began, sliding a folder across the table. "Take a look at these." I opened the folder to find printouts of emails, social media posts, and photographs. The content made my stomach turn. Someone had been systematically documenting my daily routines, my employee schedules, and even my personal life. The messages were filled with sexist slurs and threats about putting me back in my place. "Who's behind this?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. Detective Rodriguez leaned forward. "We've traced the digital footprint to several sources, but they all lead back to associates of David Steinberg. It appears he didn't take your business arrangement as well as he pretended." The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd paid Steinberg $50 million to avoid a fight, only to have him launch a shadow campaign of intimidation. "What kind of threats are we talking about?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Morrison flipped through the file. "Initially, it was just online harassment. Fake reviews of your business, anonymous complaints to regulatory agencies, that sort of thing. But last week, it escalated. Someone broke into your Denver office and went through your files." My blood ran cold. "Was anyone hurt?" "No, but they left a message on your assistant's desk. Something about women needing to learn their limits." I closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. "What do you need from me?" "We need you to be careful," Rodriguez said. "We're building a case, but these people are smart. They're covering their tracks and using intermediaries. In the meantime, we recommend hiring private security." "I'm not hiding from bullies, Detective." "Ms. Mitchell, this isn't about hiding. It's about staying alive long enough to put these people behind bars." The next morning, I arrived at Harrison Industries to find the lobby filled with reporters. News of the harassment campaign had leaked, and suddenly my business success story had become a cautionary tale about the dangers women faced in male-dominated industries. Thomas, the security guard, approached me with a concerned expression. "Ms. Mitchell, they've been here since 6 a.m. Want me to clear them out?" "No, Thomas. Let them stay. But make sure they don't interfere with business operations." I made my way to my office, where Patricia was fielding phone calls from journalists around the country. The story had struck a nerve. A successful woman entrepreneur targeted by competitors who couldn't accept being outmaneuvered. "Sarah, the Today Show wants you for an interview tomorrow," Patricia said as I passed her desk. "CNN called 3 times. And your mother." "Not now, Patricia. Hold all calls except for emergencies." I needed to think. The harassment campaign was designed to distract me from running my business, and it was working. Instead of focusing on client portfolios and market strategies, I was dealing with security consultants and police reports. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer in Denver. "The office is surrounded by reporters. What do you want me to tell them?" I typed back, "Tell them we're open for business as usual. Schedule meetings with all our major clients. They need to hear from us directly that this situation won't affect their investments." The next few days were a masterclass in crisis management. I held video conferences with nervous clients, reassuring them that their portfolios were secure. I worked with my PR team to craft a response that acknowledged the harassment without appearing weak. Most importantly, I refused to change my routine or let fear dictate my decisions. The breakthrough came on a Thursday afternoon when Detective Rodriguez called with an update. "We got him," she said, without preamble. David Steinberg's former business partner Marcus Webb decided to cooperate. He's provided evidence that Steinberg orchestrated the entire campaign. "What kind of evidence?" "Email chains, payment records, recorded conversations. Steinberg was paying a private investigation firm to dig up dirt on you. When they couldn't find anything substantial, he authorized escalation to intimidation tactics." I felt a mixture of relief and vindication. What happens now? "Now we arrest him. But Ms. Mitchell, I need you to know, this is going to get ugly. Steinberg has connections throughout the city. He's going to fight this with everything he has." The arrest made national headlines. The image of David Steinberg being led away in handcuffs became a symbol of accountability in an industry that had too long protected powerful men who couldn't handle competition from women. But Rodriguez was right about the fight. Steinberg's legal team immediately went on the offensive, claiming the harassment was the work of rogue employees acting without his knowledge. They portrayed him as a victim of a vindictive business rival who couldn't accept legitimate criticism. The trial began 6 months later. For 3 weeks, I sat in a Chicago courtroom, listening to lawyers debate whether successful women deserved to be targeted for their achievements. The defense painted me as an aggressive opportunist who had manipulated vulnerable investors. The prosecution presented evidence of a systematic campaign designed to destroy my business and reputation. The turning point came when Marcus Webb testified. He was a thin man in his 40s who looked like he hadn't slept in months. His testimony was devastating. David was obsessed with Sarah Mitchell, he said from the witness stand. He couldn't understand how someone with her background could outmaneuver him. He said she needed to be taught a lesson about her place in the business world. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned with a guilty verdict on all charges, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete validation. Not just of my business success, but of my right to exist in spaces that had traditionally excluded people like me. Steinberg was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution of $20 million. More importantly, the case sent a message throughout the financial industry that harassment and intimidation would have consequences. But the most significant moment came during the sentencing hearing. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Eleanor Hartwell, addressed Steinberg directly. "Mr. Steinberg, you targeted Ms. Mitchell not because she was dishonest or incompetent, but because she was successful. You couldn't accept that a woman could outperform you in your own industry. Your actions represent everything that's wrong with the old boys club mentality that has held back progress for too long." As I left the courthouse that day, I was surrounded by reporters asking about my future plans. I gave them the same answer I had been giving for months. I'm going back to work. The harassment campaign had an unexpected consequence. It made me a symbol of resilience in the business world. Harrison Industries became the investment firm of choice for successful women who had faced similar challenges. Our client base expanded to include female CEOs, entrepreneurs, and executives who wanted their money managed by someone who understood what it meant to fight for every opportunity. A year after the trial, I stood in the same lobby where Thomas, the security guard, had once questioned my right to be there. But now the scene was different. The lobby was filled with employees from our expanded team, financial advisors, analysts, and support staff who had joined a company that valued performance over politics. "Ms. Mitchell," Thomas called out as I headed toward the elevator, "there's someone here to see you." I turned to see a young woman in her 20s, probably fresh out of college, clutching a resume and looking nervous. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, "but I'm Ana Rodriguez. I just graduated from Northwestern with a degree in finance. I know you're not hiring entry-level analysts, but I was hoping—" "Anna, walk with me," I said, gesturing toward the elevator. As we rode to the 30th floor, I saw myself in her hopeful expression. She reminded me of the young woman who had once dreamed of making it in finance, while working 3 jobs to pay for community college. "Anna, tell me about your experience," I said as we entered my office. "I don't have much," she admitted. "I worked part-time at a local credit union during college. I've been applying to firms for 6 months, but most places want someone with connections or family in the business. What makes you think you'd be good at this job?" She straightened her shoulders. "Because I understand what it means to be underestimated. I've been told my whole life that finance is a man's world, that I should consider something more suitable for women. But I've studied every market trend, every investment strategy, every economic indicator. I know I can do this job." I smiled. "When can you start?" The look of shock on her face was priceless. "Really? You're offering me a job?" "Anna, I'm offering you an opportunity. What you do with it is up to you." 6 months later, Ana Rodriguez was one of our top junior analysts. She had the hunger and determination that comes from being told you don't belong somewhere. More importantly, she had the skills to back up her ambition. The success of Harrison Industries had exceeded even my wildest expectations. We now manage over $15 billion in assets, with offices in Chicago, Denver, and New York. Our client retention rate was the highest in the industry, and our investment returns consistently outperformed market benchmarks. But the real transformation was personal. The girl who had once been told there wasn't space for her at the family table had created space for hundreds of employees and thousands of clients. I had built something that mattered. Not just a successful business, but a platform for others who had been underestimated. The irony of my success wasn't lost on me. My parents' rejection had taught me self-reliance. David Steinberg's harassment had made me a symbol of resilience. Every obstacle had become a stepping stone to something greater. On a quiet Sunday evening, I sat in my Chicago penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, reviewing the week's performance reports. Harrison Industries had just posted record quarterly earnings, and I had been named to Fortune's 40 Under 40 Inches list for the second consecutive year. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Sarah, we saw you on the news again. We're so proud of you. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long moment, then set the phone aside without responding. Some relationships couldn't be repaired, and some bridges were better left burned. But as I looked out at the city lights, I realized I didn't need their approval anymore. I had something better. The knowledge that I had earned my place at every table I chose to sit at. The next morning, I arrived at Harrison Industries to find Thomas, the security guard, waiting for me in the lobby. "Good morning, Madam CEO," he said with a respectful nod. "Good morning, Thomas. How are you today?" "Doing well, ma'am. I wanted to let you know. There's a new employee starting today. Anna Rodriguez brought her cousin Maria for an interview. Seems like another sharp young woman who reminds me of someone I know." I smiled. "Send her up to my office when she arrives. And Thomas?" "Yes, ma'am? Make sure she knows she belongs here." As I rode the elevator to my office, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From a cramped studio apartment in Denver to the executive suite of a billion-dollar investment firm. Every step had been earned through persistence, intelligence, and an unwavering belief in my own worth. The girl who had been told there wasn't space for her had created space for herself and countless others. The woman who had been questioned by security guards was now the one they called Madam CEO. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all, not just succeeding in spite of the obstacles, but transforming those obstacles into opportunities for others to follow. The space I had created wasn't just for me. It was for every Anna Rodriguez, every young woman who had been told she didn't belong, every person who had been underestimated because of who they were, rather than what they could accomplish. I had built more than a business. I had built a legacy. And there was space for everyone. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.